Joining us today is occultist, psychic, and first-time author Nathan King. Welcome, Nathan.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Describe the moment you came to the realization that you identified as a witch.
That's a great question. I would say my first moment, um, when the word witch truly came to mind, was actually not something that I had said, but something that somebody else said to me. Um, since I was in middle school, I really was into the tarot, and I was able to go to Barnes and Noble and get little, those little pocket-sized tarot notebooks that you get in the aisles, and they still make those today. They're super fun. But what I would do starting at, into middle school, going into high school, is I would do readings in the cafeteria. And so I was doing a reading explaining, what was coming through for my friend, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you're a total witch." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I guess that does fit." And I had never looked into authentic ritual or authentic practices yet at this time. It was strictly uh, divination and wanting to be cool and spooky. And then that was my wonderful gateway into the occult and world of witchcraft specifically.
What brought you to tradcraft?
Tradcraft fascinates me because it gets into what I think is the grassroots of witchcraft, which is that visualization of witches working sabbatically around a fire in the woods, something that's very much the dirt under the fingernails of what people like to talk about with what it means to get really down and dirty with witchcraft. Granted, tradcraft is not limited to that style of working, as it can be very high magic and ceremonial. But the word is ultimately in tradition. And what I like about tradition is that here you have a set of practices that you ultimately are learning from somebody else. A tradition is something that's taught to you and then passed down to you, whether that be a form of initiation or dedication. So you have this whole community, or you have this whole stream or current of people who've practiced the same thing before you. So you know it has some sort of validity behind it, but you're also part of that chain or that continuation of that magic that's being worked before you. So it's inherently ancestral.
I love the dirt under the fingers.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
The little secrets of witchery that are there.
Please share with us your divination practice.
That's a really good question. And I think my divination practice ultimately comes down to what I'm going to be divining about, the matter of the question. How I've always worked as a psychic is, I think the more specific your question, the more specific of an answer you're going to be able to get from the universe or spirit, whoever it is, or whomever it is that you are drawing that information from. My practice will always start with a very light introductory, I would say a pep talk with the current, telling them immediately how I work and what to expect for that reading. Because if it's your first reading, that can be a little jarring and unexpected. So you always want to have that little, hey, this is what this is how I work, this is what I do, and don't believe this reading is all about. Once I do that, I'm going to do a cleansing. That could be anything from smudging to doing an offering of some kind. I always like to have a open flame if I'm able to have that, as I do think that fire is able to attract spirits, but it's also able to protect or cleanse, sort of as a purification system. And I also like to have a little dish of water. It doesn't even have to be holy water. Um, Water, I think, is the best generator for spirits, especially if you're working on a mediumship level. Once I do that, I'll do that cleansing. I'll do an opening prayer, or what's called opening the veil in my tradition, where you're quite literally creating a channel for spirit world to intercede. So it's almost as if you're raising your vibration, they're lowering their vibration. You're meeting them somewhere in the middle. So you have this really nice psychic counseling session happening.
You're about to release your debut book entitled Awakening the Witchblood. What inspired you to write this book?
Oh, yes. Even better question, and the hardest one. So for the longest time, especially when I felt very established in my daily routine and what my core practice was as a witch, I knew I wanted to write a book of some sort, and I just didn't know what that was going to be. And luckily, I had a friend through the Gardenarian community who is an author, Jack Chanik, who wrote Kabbalah for Wiccans. He's also, I think he's just released another book, a goddess book, Queen of all witcheries, I believe. But he and I were out for drinks, and he said, well, listen, if you want to write something, an author writes about stuff that is specific. It's something specific that they have to say. So it's very fine-tuned, it's very tailored. And that just kind of planted a seed. It stuck with me. And I was reading, researching something to do about Sumerian mythology, and kept coming across these ideas of these angelic tales and how people are descended from angels. And in tradcraft and a lot of hearth covens and a lot of those sort of lineages of witchcraft, there are these lineages that talk about being descended from the fairy race or from the fallen race or these angelic races. I really wanted to get behind, well, what does it mean to have witch blood? What does that folklore look like? And I was halfway in the middle of researching that when I realized, wow, this is something very specific to say. So before it was even a book, I ended up doing this as a workshop for Convocation, which is Michigan's largest occult / metaphysical conference of its kind. It's right out of Detroit. And I was teaching a workshop on the witch blood and sort of my research and very loose fitting theories of what I had together at that time. And luckily in the audience was Cross Crow Books, who then approached me after the workshop and asked if I would write them this book. And then this whole writing process came about.
In this book, you talk about the certainty of nature and how nature tends to also showcase its uncertainties. In your opinion, why is it that despite our experiences in magic, nature always seems to have the last laugh, surprising us with its many unpredictable and unavoidable changes?
I really love this question because nature ultimately, especially from my viewpoint as an occultist and as a witch, I think we look to nature as a creatrix or as a creator of some sense. It's this thing that's constantly unfolding, it's constantly changing upon itself, and that change is a creative and destructive force. And so something that is that powerful has to be that ambiguous, because I think that also stands for just in the same way these big concepts like nature, this idea of, well, if nature is the creatrix or if it's the maker, well, then it must be true. And I think when we're talking about truth, truth is also ambiguous. You have the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the things in between. So it is unforgiving in that sense. That's what continues the magic. I think that's why people are continually humbled by the magic, because it is something that we're pulling from nature, and it is something that is very unpredictable.
What can first-time practitioners gain from this book?
A big reason of what I was shooting for, especially when I was thinking about people who are just starting out and reading this material, was I wanted to give the most updated and the most thorough sort of history or understanding of the evolution of the craft as we understand it from a book that's talking about a specific thing within, a very broad subject. So the history that I lay out is very in depth, and it's very much in chronological order, so you can see how these ideas led to these other ideas. I think within magical communities, we've had especially in recent years, we need to have more of a reckoning with our own history. I think there's a lot of mysterious origins that really are not that quite mysterious, and we all need to take the wool off the eyes, so to speak, because it's out there. It just comes down to critical thinking. Everybody has a grandmother story is the joke, right? Everybody learned from their great-great-grandmother. And I think, that's all well and good, but the truth is actually stranger than fiction. I really hope that people, other than the personal empowerment, really take away that this idea that magic is not just something that is something that you practice or something that you do, but once you pick this up, you've initiated something within you. You've sparked something that doesn't really go away. You've had an interaction with the other world.
Awakening the Witch, Embodying the Art Magical will be released in May and can be found at crosscrowbooks.com and all other fine booksellers.